Halsey, your stepfather and I have been talking. You need to move out for real this time. The weekend visits aren't fair to Sienna anymore. For 13 years, my stepfather had been quietly draining my mother's savings into accounts she didn't know existed. That Sunday at her dining table, he was 3 signatures away from finishing the job. And my mother was about to help him. I set my fork down. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I'd been the difficult one since I was 9, and I knew the script. I was going to nod, eat my pot roast, drive back to Squirrel Hill, and never come back. Then my little sister stood up. She set an old shoebox between the gravy boat and my mother's wine glass. Her hand wasn't shaking, but mine was. "She's not like that," Sienna said. My stepfather went so still, I thought the water in his glass would crack. If this story is already pulling at you, please take a second to like and subscribe. It helps me keep telling these. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. I'm Halsey, 22, a med lab tech in Pittsburgh, and this is the story of the Sunday my 17-year-old sister handed me back a life I didn't know had been stolen. Let me take you back to where it began, to a small dining room in Brookline on April 13th, 2025. I'd been a Sunday dinner kid my whole life. Even after I moved into a shared apartment with my roommate Jess in October of 2024, I drove the 25 minutes back to my mother's house most Sundays. I told myself it was about the laundry, free machines, free pot roast, quiet basement. It wasn't really about laundry. I'd grown up in that house. My mother, Linda, had raised me there alone until I was 9, and then it stopped being just ours. Doug moved in the spring before my 9th birthday. He brought a recliner the color of dried mustard, a fish tank, and Sienna, 4 years old, hair to her waist, scared of the dog next door. That Sunday, April 13th, I parked behind my mother's Honda CR-V at 5:48. The sky was that flat Pittsburgh blue that means it's going to drizzle by 7. I took my laundry basket out of the back seat, tucked the dryer sheets on top, walked up the porch steps the way you walk into a job interview you don't want. Sienna opened the door before I could knock. She wasn't wearing makeup. She was always in makeup, even at home, even on Saturdays. Her cheer ribbon was off. Her eyes were quick, jumping past my shoulder to the driveway, then to the kitchen, then to me. She grabbed my wrist. "Stay tonight," she whispered. "No matter what they say, stay." She was gone before I could ask. Back to the kitchen, where my mother was setting the table. I stood on the welcome mat with my laundry basket. I noticed 2 things at once. The table was set for 6. My mother was wearing her grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones she only wore on Christmas Eve. I should have turned around right then, driven back to Jess and our IKEA couch and our cheap red wine. But I didn't. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself the same lie I'd been telling myself since I was 9. It's probably fine. They probably love me in their own way. I'm just sensitive. I walked in. Doug stepped out of the den. He hugged Sienna on his way past her, held her shoulder a beat too long. And then his eyes landed on me. "Halsey," he said, the way you say a coworker's name at a Christmas party. "Glad you made it." He kept walking. He didn't touch me. He hadn't touched me, except for one stiff side hug at my high school graduation in 21, in 13 years. My mother came out of the kitchen with a bowl of green beans. Her hands were trembling. The bowl rattled against her wedding band. I noticed her band was on the wrong hand. Left swapped to right, where my grandmother used to wear hers. When her fingers swelled, "Mom, are you okay?" She blinked at me like I'd asked her in a foreign language. "Of course, honey. Why wouldn't I be?" I didn't answer. The doorbell rang. Linda froze. Doug froze. Sienna's eyes found mine across the dining room. Her mouth said, almost like a prayer, "It's starting." The doorbell hadn't rung at that house on a Sunday in 9 years. Not for company, not for neighbors. Doug didn't let people drop by. Sienna walked to the door first. "Aunt Connie, thank you for coming." My aunt, my mother's only sister, stepped into the foyer. I hadn't seen her since 2021. She was wearing a navy blazer and her real estate agent's smile, which is the kind of smile that means she's about to ask you to sign something. Behind her smile was something else, a kind of held breath. She looked at my mother. "Linda." "Connie," my mother said, and her voice cracked. "I didn't." "Sienna, what is—" "I invited her, Mom." Doug's grin became a thin line. The doorbell rang again. This time, it was Marcy Holloway, my mother's best friend from 6th grade through her 30s. Marcy had stopped calling sometime in 2021. My mother had cried about it for 3 months, and then quietly accepted that Marcy just got busy with her own family. Marcy hadn't gotten busy. Marcy had been told by my mother over and over, in a voice my mother didn't know was being controlled, to stop calling. Marcy hugged my mother. My mother sobbed into her shoulder for 4 seconds, like a kid who'd lost her parents at a grocery store. And then she straightened and remembered Doug was watching. She wiped her face. She laughed. A brittle, wrong laugh. "Marcy, goodness, what a surprise." "Sienna asked me to come," Marcy said. "Said it was important." Doug pulled out my mother's chair for her. He pulled out his own. He didn't pull out anyone else's. We sat. Pot roast, green beans, butternut squash soup. The candle in the middle was unlit. Doug carved. For 7 minutes, we made small talk about cheerleading. Doug told Connie that Sienna had a regional pageant in Hershey the following weekend. Connie nodded slowly. Marcy said nothing. My mother smiled at her water glass. Then Linda set down her spoon. "Halsey, honey, Doug and I have been talking." I waited. I knew the rest. I'd known it since she called me on April 1st and said come to dinner on the 13th. The weekend visits, they aren't fair to your sister anymore. You're 22. You have your own life. We think it's time you stop coming back, for real this time. Doug nodded. "It's just that Sienna needs her space. You're an adult, Halsey. Time to grow up." Connie's eyes narrowed. Marcy still didn't speak. I set my fork down. I started to nod. I started to say what I always said. "Okay, Mom." And then Sienna stood up. I want to take you backward for a minute. I want you to understand why, when my little sister stood up at that table, every single muscle in my body locked. I was 9 when my mother married Doug Mercer. They had a small wedding at Penn Lane's banquet hall, the room above the bowling alley where they'd met. I wore a yellow dress my mother bought at JCPenney without asking me. I hated yellow. I told her I hated yellow the way kids tell their mothers they hate things. Daily, with full conviction. She bought yellow anyway. In the wedding video, you can see me sitting at a corner table with a half-eaten dinner roll, watching Doug pick Sienna up and spin her in front of the cake. He called her my princess, not my daughter. My princess. She laughed and squealed and grabbed his nose. I sat. I watched. My mother caught the bouquet. She kissed Doug. She did not look for me. That was the night I learned the word stepchild. I learned it the way some kids learn the word divorce. Not from a book, but from a relative who whispers it. Aunt Connie crouched down by my chair after the ceremony and said, "Halsey, sweetheart, you're still your mom's number one, I promise." She was wrong, I wasn't. The next 13 years had a pattern. The pattern was small, tiny things. Things that, on their own, you could explain away. But together, they were a wall. When I was 11, I had a piano recital at Brazier Middle School, Bach's Minuet in G. I'd practiced for 4 months. My mother told me, the morning of, that they'd have to miss it. Sienna had been invited last minute to a cheer pageant evaluation in Erie. 3 hours each way, they couldn't be there. I played in front of 100 parents, none of them mine. And when I came home, Doug was in the den braiding Sienna's hair for the photos. He hadn't asked how the recital went. Linda gave me a one-armed side hug and said, "I'm sorry, baby. There'll be other recitals." There weren't other recitals. I quit piano the next month. When I was 12, I took a TOEFL prep test for a summer immersion program at Pitt. Doug accidentally spilled his coffee across my results when I left them on the dining room table to celebrate. He said with a frown that he'd buy me a new printout. He never did. The deadline passed. When I was 13, we moved houses across town 3 blocks, and somehow the box of all my childhood books went missing. Doug shrugged. Movers must have left it on the truck. Sienna's pink bin of stuffed animals made it. My library of 300 books did not. When I was 14, my mother handed me a birthday card. White envelope, my father Wesley's handwriting on the front. She told me, with sad eyes, that I shouldn't open it. She said she'd read it. She said he'd written that I didn't really matter to him anymore. She said she didn't want me to be hurt by his words. I didn't open it. I never opened the next one either. Or the next. When I was 15, my Samsung phone fell out of my backpack while I was helping Doug bring the recycling to the curb. He picked it up. He looked at it. He held it for 1 too many seconds. Then he dropped it. He apologized loudly, like a man performing an apology in a play, and said, "Sorry, kid. It slipped." The screen was cracked. The cellular antenna was shot. The phone never made calls again. He didn't replace it. I'd saved 7 months of babysitting money for that phone. I used a hand-me-down flip phone from a neighbor for the rest of high school. When I was 16, I ate dinner alone in my bedroom for an entire school year. My mother told her hairdresser in front of me that I was difficult since the womb. The hairdresser laughed. My mother laughed. Doug, who was reading a magazine in the corner, glanced up and smiled a small, private smile. I went home and made myself a peanut butter sandwich at the counter. I did not tell anyone what I had heard. I just took the sandwich upstairs. When I was 17, My college counselor called my mother twice to tell her I was a strong candidate for a small, private liberal arts school in Lewisburg that was offering me a partial scholarship. My mother told me the school had changed their mind about the scholarship. She told me they had emailed her. There was no email. I found out 2 years later that my counselor had called 4 times and never reached her. Doug had answered every call. He had told my counselor in his measured, reasonable voice that Halsey isn't really college material. We're going to keep her closer to home. The counselor was a woman named Mrs. Brewer. She tried to leave my mother a voicemail. The voicemail box was full. I do not know if that was an accident. When I was 18, I graduated from Brassier High School. Doug and Linda missed it. They drove to Hershey to watch Sienna compete in a pre-junior state pageant. I walked across the stage. The empty chair where my parents would have sat had 2 folded programs on it. Aunt Connie wasn't allowed to come. Doug had told my mother that family events were immediate family only. Wesley, my father, sent flowers to the school office. They were thrown out before I saw them. I went home that night. The house was empty. I made myself a microwave burrito. I ate it standing at the kitchen counter. I told myself out loud, "You're going to be okay, Halsey. You're going to get out." I started CCAC's MedLab Tech program the next August. I lived at home for 3 more years to save money. I counted every night. On the day I moved out, October 12th, 2024, Doug helped me carry 1 box to my car. He told me, on the porch, "Your mother and I are proud of you, Halsey. You're finally finding your independence." His hand never touched the box. I sat at the table on April 13th, 2025, with my mother telling me I needed to really move out, and I understood, the way you understand a punchline a beat after the laugh, that nothing had ever been about Sienna. I had been the project, the slow extraction, the difficult one they could carve out of the will without anyone questioning it. I had spent 13 years believing the problem was me. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a brick walk-up in Squirrel Hill in October 2024. My roommate Jess was a friend of a friend. She was 24, a barista at Commonplace Coffee on Forbes, a graduate of UMass Amherst with a humanities degree she never used. She wore men's flannel and made playlists for plants. She was the gentlest person I had ever met. The first night I stayed there, I cried in the shower for 40 minutes. Jess pretended she didn't hear. She left a mug of chamomile tea outside the bathroom door and a Post-it that said, "I made too much, in case you want some." I drank the tea. The first week, I called my mother 4 times. Doug picked up every time. "She's napping, Halsey. She's at the grocery store. She's not feeling well. I'll have her call you back." She never called me back. Thanksgiving 2024. Linda texted me a photo of Doug carving a turkey at her dining table. The caption said, "Wish you were here. We have 3 weekends a month. Make them count next time, sweetie." I'd been at her house 6 days earlier. I stared at the message for 9 minutes, then put my phone face down. Christmas 2024. My mother texted, "Doug's family is coming to town. Just immediate this year, honey. I'll see you New Year's." They never had me over for New Year's. I made spaghetti carbonara with Jess. We watched 2 episodes of a British baking show. I went to bed at 10 and cried into the pillow for half an hour with the door closed because I didn't want Jess to feel obligated to come check on me. February 9th, 2025, my 22nd birthday. No call from my mother, no card. At 11:52 at night, my phone buzzed, a text from a number I hadn't saved. It just said, "Happy birthday, sister. I love you. I'm sorry I can't say it out loud yet." It was Sienna. We'd exchanged maybe 40 words a year for the last decade. I read the text 3 times. I cried. I didn't text back. I didn't know what to text back. I assumed she'd sent it because of guilt or because some teen mental health TikTok had told her to. I had no idea that night that my 17-year-old sister had spent 4 months building a file on her own father. I had no idea she'd spent that birthday driving past my apartment building, twice, just to see the light in my window. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday, my mother called me. First time in 8 weeks. "Halsey, there's a Sunday dinner on April 13th. I need you to come. It's important." I said yes, before I thought about it. I told myself I'd missed her. I told myself maybe this would be the year she remembered. I had no idea what was already in the shoebox under Sienna's bed. If you've ever been the difficult one in your family, the kid who couldn't get along, the one who was just so sensitive, the one whose chair was always a little too far from the table, drop a comment below. I want to know. I spent 18 years thinking the problem was me. There are more of us than you think, and you are not alone tonight. So we're back at the table. April 13th, 2025. The candle still unlit. The dining room still hush. Sienna was standing. She reached under her chair and lifted the box. Black Vans shoebox, lid taped on with one strip of clear packing tape. She pulled the tape off. She put the box between my mother's wine glass and the gravy boat. Doug's hand stopped at the salt shaker. He didn't pick it up. He didn't put it down. He just stopped. "Sienna." My mother's voice was small. "Honey, sit down." Sienna's hand went into the box. She pulled out a single page, a photocopy. I could see even from where I was sitting, the seal at the top, Erie County, Pennsylvania, deed transfer form. And below it, my mother's signature in her own loopy cursive, dated October 14th, 2024, adding Douglas R. Mercer as joint tenant with right of survivorship to a small cabin on the south shore of Lake Erie. The cabin my grandfather had left my mother in 2003. The cabin we'd gone to every July when I was a little girl, before Doug. The cabin where I'd learned to swim. The cabin where my mother, in 1998, had taught me how to gut a fish under the porch light. She slid the page in front of my mother. My mother looked at it. She looked at the signature. She looked at the date. Her face went the color of old paper. She whispered, "I don't remember signing this." Doug laughed. One short, sharp laugh, like a clearing of the throat. "Linda, of course you do." We talked about it, estate planning, routine. "You signed it at Brad's office in October." Connie leaned forward. She did not raise her voice. "What office, Doug?" "Brad Holloway, my attorney." "He's not an attorney for trusts." Connie's voice was flat. "He's a deed and title guy out of East Liberty. I checked his bar listing this morning." Doug pivoted toward her. I'm not interested in your editorial commentary, Connie. This is family business. You're at my sister's dining table, Connie said. I'm family. The kitchen clock ticked. Sienna reached into the box again. She pulled out a stack of papers, bank statements, 9 of them. She fanned them out across the tablecloth like a poker hand. Doug's eyes flickered to them, then away. Pittsburgh Federal Credit Union, Sienna read aloud. Account holder D. Mercer Soul. $200, May 2023, 400. July 2023, 600. November 2023, 800. February 2024, 200 again. April 2024, 400. June 2024, 600. August 2024, 800. January 2025, 200. Last month, total $4,890. She lifted her eyes to her father, all transferred from the joint account you share with my mother, into an account you opened the year you started giving her Lexapro from your bowling buddy. Doug's jaw moved. Sienna, you don't know what you're looking at. That's the cabin maintenance fund. I called the credit union, Dad. The account name on the statements is yours alone. Mom's not even a beneficiary. My mother looked at the bank statements. She looked at her own hands. She started to cry without making any sound. I had not moved. I had not spoken since the moment I sat down. My fork was still where I'd set it on the napkin. Sienna's hand went into the box a third time. I want to explain how she did it. I want you to understand that my sister didn't wake up on April 13th and become the hero of her own story. She had been working for 5 months. She was 17. In December of 2024, 2 months after I moved out, Sienna went into Doug's home office on a Wednesday afternoon to find packing tape. She had a poster board project due for AP US history. Doug was, ostensibly, at lunch with a client. She would tell me later that she opened the top drawer of his desk for a roll of tape and saw on his desk pad a folder labeled Estate Planning, Linda. She opened it. She saw the deed transfer. She saw a draft dated October 28th, 2024, written by Brad Holloway, Esquire, that left 0% of my mother's assets to me, 60% to Sienna, held in trust until she was 25, and 40% to Doug. She put the folder back. She sat on his office floor for an hour. She tried to convince herself she had misread it. She went into her bedroom, shut the door, and texted me a heart emoji that I did not see because I was working a night shift at the lab. Then she opened her notes app and started writing down everything she remembered seeing. In January, every Wednesday at noon, when Doug went to his client lunches, Sienna read every paper on his desk. She photographed the will. She photographed the deed. She found a credit union statement under a coffee-stained client packet, a statement my mother had never seen. For an account my mother's name was nowhere on. In February, on a Saturday morning when she was supposed to be at cheer practice, she hid in the back of Doug's Honda Pilot under a blanket. She lay there for 90 minutes sweating until he got in to drive to a meeting. Halfway through the drive, he pulled into the gravel turnout near the Allegheny River and spoke aloud twice, 3 times, slowly, refining each take. Lynn, sweetheart, you just need to sign so we can keep the cabin safe. Don't tell Halsey, she'll make a thing of it. You know how she is. Sienna's phone was on voice memos under the blanket. She did not breathe. In March, she borrowed my mother's well-worn copy of Educated by Tara Westover. She wanted to read it because her English teacher had assigned an excerpt. A piece of yellow legal pad paper fell out from between pages 184 and 185. It was a letter, in my mother's handwriting, addressed to Connie, dated March 9th, 2023. Connie, I'm sorry, I know it's been a long time. Some weeks I think I'm imagining things. Doug says I'm just tired. I think I'm losing pieces of myself. I don't know how I got here. I'm scared. I'll call you on Sunday. I love you. Lynn. It had never been sent. Sienna read it. She put it back in the book. She carried the book under her arm to Lake Realty in Mount Lebanon 2 days later and walked into Connie's office without an appointment. She handed Connie the letter. Connie cried for 9 minutes at her own desk. Then she logged into my mother's Gmail using a password she remembered Linda using since 2008. Tucker 1974, my mother's childhood dog, plus her birth year, and discovered that for 4 years, every email from Connie, every email from Marcy Holloway, every email from a cousin named Tracy in Cleveland had been auto-filtered into a folder labeled Promotions/Other, and then deleted. Connie hired Patricia Tully, Esquire, a quiet, sharp family law attorney out of Mount Lebanon, that same afternoon. In March, Sienna went back into Doug's home office one more time, and she tried 4-digit codes on the small floor safe in the closet. The third code worked. The numbers were 0907, September 7th, 2007, her birthday. Inside the safe, she found a manila envelope. Inside the envelope, she found a 2014 marital separation agreement, signed by Doug Mercer and Carol Reichert. There was no final divorce decree. She took photos of every page. On April 4th, 2025, she walked to her bedroom mailbox and opened a thin white envelope from Carnegie Mellon's School of Art. She had been admitted with a partial scholarship. She had applied in secret. On April 5th at breakfast, she let the admission letter sit on the corner of the table near the toast plate. She wanted to see what her father would do. Doug saw it. He read the first paragraph. He folded the letter in half. He tore it. He tore it again. He dropped the pieces in the trash. He sipped his coffee. He told Sienna, conversationally, "You're going to Penn State, Princess. That conversation is over." Sienna cried at the table. The crying was real. She is not a manipulator. She just was. That morning, finally honest about the kind of grief she'd been carrying. That night, she fished the pieces out of the trash, taped them back together with clear tape, and put them in the shoebox. She texted Connie. She texted Marcy. She invited them, through her mother's own phone, a phone she had known the password to since she was 14, to dinner on April 13th. She did not text me. She told me later that she didn't text me because she was afraid I wouldn't come. That if she gave me a single warning, I'd find a reason to stay in Squirrel Hill. So she gambled on the one thing she knew about me, that I never said no to my mother. She was right. I want to tell you about the small things between us. For 13 years, my sister and I did not have a relationship, not the way sisters do on TV. not the way Jess and her older sister text every morning about coffee. Sienna and I lived in the same house from 2012 to 2024, and we barely spoke. Doug structured the house that way, but there were small things. In 2015, the night of Doug's 46th birthday, Sienna was 8 and I was 12. We were having cheesecake. Doug was telling a story about a salesman he'd outsmarted that week. Sienna had a slice the size of her face. I had a sliver. When Doug stood up to refill his glass, Sienna lifted half of her slice with her fingers and slid it onto my plate. She licked the frosting off her fingertips and looked at me with her enormous 8-year-old eyes and said, in a whisper, "I'm not hungry. I ate it. I did not say thank you." I did not understand then that she was already practicing. In 2017, my 14th birthday, she was 10. Doug had told her in front of me that Halsey doesn't really do birthdays. Sienna nodded. The next morning, I found a stapled comic book under my door, 6 pages in marker and colored pencil. The title was The Princess of the Library. The princess was a girl who lived in a house full of books and learned to fight a dragon by reading. The dragon was a small, mean man with a mustache. The princess won. Sienna had drawn the books from my missing childhood library. She had remembered the titles I'd cried about for months. I kept the comic in my desk drawer until I moved out. It is in my desk drawer in Squirrel Hill right now. In 2019, when I was 16 and eating dinner upstairs every night, Sienna started sitting in the hallway outside my room. She never knocked. She never said anything. She just sat on the carpet with her back against the wall, listening for me to breathe. I knew she was out there. I never opened the door. I think part of me believed I'd lose my survival edge if I let her in. In 2020, during the pandemic, the house was a pressure cooker. We were all home all day. Doug taught yoga to my mother in the living room. Linda taught Sienna how to bake banana bread. I sat on my bedroom floor with my headphones on. Sienna would tell me in 2025 that she used to sit on the floor of her own bedroom with her headphones on at the same hours, listening to the same podcast, a show called Family Cycle Breakers, through the air vent that ran between our rooms. We never spoke about it. We were each separately listening to the same woman in our headphones explain narcissistic enablers. In 2022, when Sienna was 14, Doug pulled her aside after dinner and told her he needed her help. He said I was going off the rails and that he needed to keep an eye on me. He asked her to forward him my text messages whenever I texted her. She said yes. She walked into her bedroom and cried into a hoodie for 2 hours. Then she opened her phone and started forwarding him old, harmless texts I'd sent her in 2018 and 2019. He didn't notice. He nodded along for 2 years. She protected me without me ever knowing. In 2023, she was 15. One night she overheard Doug on the phone in the laundry room. He thought she was at choir. She was at the top of the basement stairs. The voice on the other end was a woman's voice. Doug said, "I miss you, babe." He said it in a tone Sienna had never heard him use with my mother. He said the name Carol 3 times. Sienna wrote in her journal that night, "I think my dad is hurting Mom and Halsey. I don't know what to do." In 2024, the morning I moved out, Sienna stood at her bedroom window with the curtain pulled aside. I didn't see her. I was carrying a box to my car. She watched me drive away. She told me later that she sat on the floor of her bedroom for 2 hours that afternoon, and she wrote in her journal, "I have to do this alone now. She made it out. I have to make sure she stays out." She was 16 years old. There is one more moment I want to tell you about, because for me, it sits in the middle of everything. In the spring of 2024, 6 months before I moved out, Sienna came home from cheer practice with a black eye. Not from Doug. From a stunt that went wrong. A girl named Brittany had landed an elbow on her cheekbone during a basket toss. Sienna was crying when she came in the back door. Doug saw the eye, sighed, and walked back into his office. My mother put ice on it for 2 minutes and went back to her crossword. I was at the kitchen table eating leftover pasta. I stood up. I got a clean cloth, soaked it in cold water, wrung it out, folded it. I sat on the floor next to her chair. I held the cloth against her eye for 45 minutes, switching hands when one got tired, refreshing it in the sink twice. We did not speak. She did not look at me. But once, halfway through, her free hand came up and rested on my wrist. Just for a second. Then it dropped back into her lap. She told me later that she went upstairs that night and wrote in her journal, "Halsey is the only person in this house who knew I needed help today. I had spent 13 years thinking my sister was the favored child, the chosen one, the one who got the love I didn't." She had been spending 13 years quietly, trying to give it back to me. There is more I learned after that dinner that I want you to know. I want you to understand how wide the web was. Because part of healing, for me, and maybe for you, has been understanding that what looked like one bad man making one bad decision was actually one bad man, slowly, methodically, removing every safety net my mother and I had. The WhatsApp screenshots Sienna found in the safe were from 2023. There were 43 of them. Doug and Carol Reichert had been messaging on and off since 2021, the year Sienna turned 14, the year Doug began isolating my mother in earnest. In one message dated September 8th, 2023, Doug wrote, "Babe, I'm done with the cold up here. 2 more years. I'm wrapping up some loose ends with my wife's accounts. I'll come down to Tampa for good." Carol wrote back, "I'm tired of waiting. You promised." She had been waiting 11 years. The credit union was small. Pittsburgh Federal, 3 branches. No overlap with my mother's bank. Doug had opened the D. Mercer Soul account in March 2022. He had used a cousin's P.O. box in Brentwood, Pennsylvania, as the mailing address. My mother had never received a single piece of mail tied to that account. The transfers ranged from $200 to $800 every 2 to 3 months, always on a weekday afternoon, always from the joint checking account my mother believed was being used for groceries and household savings. Dr. Whitaker, the woman who had been prescribing my mother Lexapro for 2 years, was not, in fact, a doctor. She was a psychiatric nurse practitioner named Kelly Whitaker. She had legal prescribing authority in Pennsylvania. But she had also met Doug at bowling in 2019. She had seen my mother as a patient for 12 minutes. 12. Before issuing the first prescription. There were no follow-up notes. There was no diagnostic workup. When Patricia Tully later interviewed her in May, Kelly Whitaker said on the record, Doug told me Linda was anxious. I trusted him. I should have done my own intake. I'm sorry. Brad Holloway was a small-time deed and title attorney out of East Liberty. He drafted the deed transfer and the will in a single afternoon. His invoice, which Patricia Tully later subpoenaed and obtained in 5 days, no court fight needed, was $480. He had known Doug for 14 years. They bowled on the same Wednesday night league. My mother's Gmail had been compromised since 2019, when she'd given Doug her password to help her deal with spam. He had set up a filter on October 11th, 2020, that auto-deleted any email from connie.boer@lakerealty.net, marcy.holloway@gmail.com, and tracy.boer.cleveland@gmail.com. 4 years of family disappeared into a folder my mother never saw. Her phone, the iPhone Doug had insisted on upgrading her to in 2021, had blocked number settings that hid Connie, Marcy, and Tracy from her contact list. She thought they had moved on. She thought she had lost them through her own quiet failures. She had not lost them. They had been taken. Every cord that tied my mother to the people who would have noticed her drifting, Doug had quietly clipped, one by one, over 4 years. She had spent those 4 years thinking she was getting older, more tired, more forgetful. She had spent those 4 years apologizing to a man who was, in slow motion, swallowing her. Back at the dinner table, Sienna's third reach into the box, she pulled out a printed sheet of paper and slid it in front of my mother. It was a screenshot of a WhatsApp message dated September 8th, 2023. Doug's photo in the corner. Carol's name at the top. My mother read it. Once, twice. Her shoulders started to shake. Doug stood up. Linda, don't. She's a teenager. She's confused. Don't believe. Sit down, Doug. Connie's voice was a closed door. He sat. Marcy Holloway spoke for the first time at the table that night. Her voice was so quiet I had to lean forward to hear it. Linda, for 15 years, every Wednesday you called me at 4 o'clock, like clockwork, always at 4. After your shift at the school, we'd talk for an hour about our kids, about John, about the cabin. You stopped, Lynn. 4 years ago? Just stopped. I called you. I left messages. I drove by your house twice. You never called back. I thought you were done with me. I thought I'd done something. My mother shook her head. Marcy, I thought you stopped. I thought everyone stopped. I never stopped, Lynn. The room held its breath. Marcy's hands were on her own lap. I think you weren't getting my calls. My mother turned to Doug, slowly, like a glacier turning. What did you do? Doug opened his mouth, closed it, opened it. Linda, sweetheart, we can talk about this in private. What did you do? Sienna's fourth reach into the box. She pulled out a piece of yellow legal pad paper. She unfolded it. She laid it in front of my mother. My mother read 3 words. She put her hand over her mouth. The handwriting was hers. She had written it. In March 2023. She had hidden it in a book she loved. She had been planning to mail it. She had forgotten she had even written it. Connie, I'm scared. I'll call you on Sunday. Lynn, my mother sobbed. One short, wet sob, and then she covered her face. She kept her face covered for a long time. I could see her shoulders move under her cardigan. Connie reached across the table and put her hand on the back of my mother's wrist and did not let go. I had still not spoken. I had not moved from my chair. I had not taken a single bite of my pot roast. I'd love to tell you that I was thinking some clear, brave thought in those minutes, that I was rehearsing a speech, that I had a plan. The truth is, what I was thinking was, I felt sorry for the candle. The candle was supposed to be lit. Nobody had lit the candle. I'd been staring at it the whole dinner. The wick was clean and dry. The wax was unscarred. The candle was waiting for a thing that wasn't going to happen. Sienna reached into the box one more time. She lifted out 3 sheets of paper. Brad Holloway, Esquire's letterhead. The draft will. She slid it across the table to me. I read it. I read the section that said, in clean italicized type, Halsey Renee Devon, daughter, shall receive nothing from this estate. The remainder shall be divided 60% to Sienna Mercer, held in trust until age 25, trustee Douglas R. Mercer, and 40% to Douglas R. Mercer. I read it twice. The print was small. The paper was warm from sitting in the shoebox under my sister's bed. There was a small ring on the page where she'd set a glass down at some point. The signature line at the bottom was empty. It hadn't been signed yet. They had been waiting for the right Sunday. My mother looked at me. She had stopped breathing. I looked at her. Mom, you cut me out of everything. Her voice was a child's voice. Halsey, baby, I would never. Linda. Doug grabbed her wrist. She's confused. Brad must have made a mistake. This is a draft. We can fix this. Halsey, look at me. Take your hand off her. My voice was so flat it surprised me. He did not take his hand off her. Connie stood up. Doug, step away from my sister. He let go. Sienna reached one last time into the box. She lifted out a photocopy. Manila colored. Slightly yellowed. It was the 2014 separation agreement of Douglas R. Mercer and Carol Reichert. Signed. Notarized. Untouched since. She set it on top of the will. Dad, you never divorced Carol. Mom isn't your wife. The marriage is void. The silence that came after that sentence had a weight to it. I felt it in my chest. Marcy put a hand on the back of my mother's chair, like she was steadying a person on a swaying boat. Doug went the color of cold ash. Connie didn't blink. I retained Patricia Tully this morning. The deed transfer to the cabin will be revoked first thing Monday. The annulment paperwork is drafted. Carol's been served. She signed the consent on Friday. Doug stood. He picked up his car keys. He turned toward the door. Sienna reached into the box one more time. She pulled out a sheet of paper that had been folded in eighths. She unfolded it on the table. It had been torn in maybe 12 pieces. Clear packing tape held it back together. The Carnegie Mellon School of Art admission letter. And this is mine, Dad. You tore it up Saturday. I'm going in September. I'm going with my sister. He looked at her. Once. And for 1 second I saw something move behind his face that wasn't anger. It was the look of a man finding out his own escape hatch had been welded shut by his daughter. Then the door clicked shut behind him. He did not slam it. That was the strangest part. After 13 years of being a man who closed every door behind him hard enough to rattle the dishes, slammed cabinets, slammed car doors, slammed the front door when he wanted everyone to know he was angry. He closed the door on April 13th, 2025, with the same gentleness you'd use shutting a children's library, like he was already practicing being a man who lived somewhere else. We sat at the table for a long time after he left. Nobody cleared the plates. Nobody picked up a fork. Marcy stood. She walked around the table. She put one hand on the back of my mother's neck, the way mothers comfort scared children. "Lynn, pack a bag. You're coming home with me tonight." My mother nodded. She did not look up. Connie pulled a folded blue paper from her purse and pushed it across the tablecloth toward where Doug had been sitting. Notice of revocation of power of attorney. He'll be served at his hotel by Monday morning. He has 48 hours to vacate the premises. I had not realized I was crying. Sienna was looking at me. She walked around the table slowly. She stopped at my chair. She knelt down so we were eye to eye. "I'm sorry I waited so long." I shook my head. "You're 17, Sienna. You didn't owe me anything." Her face cracked open. She said it the way you say the truest thing you have ever said. "I owe you everything." My mother spoke. "Halsey, baby." "Not tonight, Mom." I stood up. I walked into the kitchen. I rinsed my plate at the sink because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Sienna followed me. She did not say anything. She picked up the dish towel and started drying. Marcy packed a small bag for my mother. Connie sat in the dining room and called Patricia Tully. The candle was still unlit when I finally walked out the front door an hour later, with Sienna's hand in mine. We drove east toward Squirrel Hill in a Honda Civic with a cracked taillight. The drizzle had started. Jess was awake on the couch when we walked in. She looked at Sienna's face, then mine. She did not ask. She just stood up, folded her blanket, and said, "The couch is yours, kid." That was the night my real life started. Healing is not about getting an apology. I want you to hear me say that. Healing is not about getting an apology, because the people who hurt you most are often not capable of giving one. Healing is the moment you finally realize that the people who told you you were the difficult one your whole life were the ones with the storm inside. Not you. You were the kid in the rain. Tonight, if any of this sounded like your own dining room, please take care of yourself. Drink a glass of water. Send a text to one person who is kind to you. You deserve people who tell you who you actually are, not who they need you to be. The week after that dinner moved faster than the 13 years before it. Patricia Tully revoked the deed transfer to the cabin on Tuesday morning, April 15th. The Erie County Recorder confirmed by Wednesday. Doug stayed at the Holiday Inn Express on Penn Avenue in East Liberty for 4 nights. On Friday, April 18th, he flew Spirit Airlines to Tampa with 1 suitcase, no rolling, just 1 duffel slung across his shoulder. He moved in with Carol Reichert. He left behind a green velvet armchair, 3 suits, and a fish tank. Sienna and I emptied into the bathtub before donating the tank to the Carnegie Library's children's room. Patricia Tully filed the annulment of the marriage between Linda Devin Mercer and Douglas R. Mercer on Monday, April 21st. The annulment was granted on Monday, May 19th. The marriage was treated under Pennsylvania law as if it had never legally happened. My mother got her maiden name back. Linda Devin, same as me. She did not get herself back as fast as she got her name back. I called my father, Wesley Devon, that Wednesday from my apartment. Sienna sat next to me on the couch. I told him I had been a fool. He said, "Halsey, baby, you weren't a fool, you were a kid. You were her kid. I should have fought harder." We cried on the phone for 11 minutes. Then he asked, "Can I drive down? Can I meet you somewhere? I don't want to overwhelm you." I told him not yet. I told him I needed a few months. He understood. He said, "I'll be here. I'll be here every single day until you say come." He sent me a photo of the 14 birthday cards he had been saving. 14 of them. One for every year from age 9 through 22. Sealed and addressed and undelivered after Linda had refused them. He had kept everyone. I told my mother, on a phone call on the third Sunday after the dinner, that I was not going to be ready to see her for a while. She cried. She said, "I understand." She did understand. That was new. Sienna moved into my apartment in Squirrel Hill on the night of April 13th, and she stayed for 4 months and 3 days. I want to tell you what she did with those 4 months, because this is the part of the story that saved me. In the first week, she got up before me every morning. She made me eggs. She made me coffee. She left a Post-it on the pillow next to my head each night that said, in her tiny, precise handwriting, "Sleep well, sister." I saved every one. There are 123 of them in a manila envelope on my bookshelf. In the second week, she helped me write the first letter I ever sent my father. 5 pages, handwritten, double-sided. She sat next to me at the kitchen table at 1 a.m. and read every draft. She crossed out the part where I said I was sorry. She wrote in the margin, "You don't have to apologize to him. You were a kid. Just tell him what you remember loving about him." I remembered 3 things, in the end. I remembered the way he smelled after working in the workshop, cedar and sawdust and outdoor sweat. I remembered the song he used to sing to me, off-key, when he tucked me in. And I remembered that he was the only adult in my early life who had ever knelt down to be at my eye level when he talked to me. I wrote those 3 things in the letter. I sealed it. Sienna walked it to the mailbox at the end of our street because my hands were shaking too hard to hold the envelope. In the 3rd week, she organized my closet. I had not organized my closet since I moved in. I had been living mostly out of the laundry basket. She did not ask. She just took everything out one Sunday afternoon. While I was at work, washed what was dirty, hung what was clean, folded what didn't need a hanger, and threw out 3 things that didn't fit me anymore. When I came home, I cried. She said, "You don't have a real bedroom yet. You have a corner. Now you have a closet, too." That was the first time I noticed she was building me a home. In the 4th week, she rode the 61C bus with me to my first therapy appointment at a small clinic on Murray Avenue. I had never been to a therapist. I was 22 years old. I had spent 18 years thinking the problem was me. Sienna sat in the waiting room with a book. Educated, the same one our mother had hidden the letter in, and she didn't read it. She watched the door for me. When I came out 45 minutes later, my face was wet. She did not ask. She just stood up, took my hand, and walked me to a small coffee shop on Forbes called Make Your Mark. She ordered me a hot chocolate. She let me cry into a paper napkin. In the 5th week, On a Tuesday night, when I was making dinner and accidentally oversalted the soup, and immediately said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," 3 times like a small stuck loop, she put her hand on my shoulder. She said very quietly, "Halsey, you don't have to apologize to me for soup." I cried into the pot. She turned the burner off. We ordered pizza. In the 6th week, she left a stapled letter on the kitchen coffee table. 14 pages, notebook paper. She titled it, in marker, 54 Things You Do Right. Number 17, you always thank the bus driver. Number 29, you bought me a winter coat in 2018 with money from your part-time job and gave it to me wrapped in newspaper because you couldn't afford gift wrap, and you said it didn't matter. And I knew it mattered because your hands were shaking. Number 41, you are a good person, and you didn't learn that from anyone in our house. You learned it on your own. Number 54, you are not difficult. You are warm. I see you. I've always seen you. I read it on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, and I cried until Jess came home from her closing shift at the coffee shop and sat down next to me and ate cereal out of the box without saying a word. On August 18th, 2025, Sienna and Jess made me a pancake breakfast. The pancakes were heart-shaped. There was one candle in the center of the stack, the number 22. Sienna stood up and said, I know your birthday is in February, but you've never had a birthday breakfast that wasn't sad. So this is your make-up birthday. You're allowed 2. She had bought a small wrapped present from the secondhand bookstore in Squirrel Hill. She handed it to me. It was a hardcover copy of A Little Princess. She had written inside the front cover in green ink, for the girl who was always the princess of the library, even when nobody else knew. I blew out the candle. I made one wish. I will not tell you what it was. I will tell you it came true. Not the way wishes come true in movies. The way wishes come true in real life, slowly, quietly, in increments small enough that you don't notice until one morning you wake up, and the wish is the room you're already living in. In September, Sienna started her first semester at Carnegie Mellon School of Art. I drove her to her dorm in a U-Haul with 3 boxes and a corkboard. She hugged me in the parking lot and said, "Don't stop calling me, sister." I didn't. In October, my father drove down from Erie to Pittsburgh. He met me at a quiet diner called the Pamelas on Forbes. He cried when he hugged me. He gave me a small wooden box he had carved with his own hands while waiting 8 years to see me. Inside were the 14 birthday cards. I read them later that night, alone on my couch with a cup of chamomile tea. I read every one. In December, my mother started weekly therapy on her own. With a real psychiatrist she chose herself, off the Lexapro and onto a slow, careful taper of a different medication that suited her actual diagnosis. She told me in January that she was finally sleeping through the night. She also told me, on a phone call in January, that she had found a small notebook in her own nightstand drawer that she did not remember owning. The notebook was hers, her handwriting. She'd kept it from 2021 through 2024. The entries were short. They said things like, "Forgot what I came into the kitchen for again today," and "I don't know why Marcy won't return my calls," and "Doug says I'm getting old. I am only 50. She read me an entry from late 2023. It said, "I think I had a daughter named Halsey, who used to laugh more. She cried on the phone. I didn't know what to say. I told her I was still here. I told her I still laughed. I told her for the first time in 18 years that I had never been the difficult one. Saying that out loud cost me something I'm still figuring out. I'm glad I said it. In February of 2026, my mother sent me a small package. Inside was the wedding photograph in which she'd been holding the bouquet and looking past me. She had taken it out of the family album. She had written on the back in her own hand, "I'm sorry I didn't look for you. I will spend the rest of my life looking for you." In the spring of 2026, my mother and I started joint therapy. Once a week, 45 minutes. We are 3 months in. I have not yet been able to call her mom to her face. We are rebuilding the word slowly. She understands. The therapist understands. I understand that I'm allowed to take as long as I need to. This is what I want you to know. My little sister was the first person who ever told me I was good. I'm 23 now. I'm still learning how to believe her.